welcome to another edition of Did You Know Doctor Who, what you may not know about Doctor Who. This time we're going to have a look at a story which hasn't been reanimated at all and hasn't actually had a proper release because it is mostly missing except for the final episode. And that is as of recording and filming this. This is the very infamous and very beloved Celestial Toymaker. I hope you enjoy. Working titles included the Toymaker and the Trilogic Game. Whilst only the final story is still around, the ending, which states next episode, was still missing until it was found completed in Australia in 1980. This is the first of 6 Doctor Who scripts to be written by Brian Hales, and out of those 6, one of only 2 to not feature the Ice Warriors. It was at one point considered writing out William Hartnell as the Doctor in this story by making the Doctor become invisible at one point and then regain visibility later with the appearance of a different person, but the idea was vetoed, which is very interesting considering this would have been the first ever regeneration story if you really think about it. In Hall of Dolls, whilst deciding which 7 chairs, 6 of which are deadly, while 1 remains safe to choose, the King of Hearts recites a version of the children's counting rhyme Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, which includes the racial slur, which is the N-word, in the second line. The use of this word was considered acceptable by the BBC at the time of the story's original 1966 broadcast. Although the rhyme is still present on the BBC Audio CD release of the story, it has been obscured by Peter Purves' narration in order to correspond to modern views on the use of the N-word. Similarly, the word celestial is itself an old slur used to describe the Chinese. The Celestial Toy Room could therefore be the first episode of the Doctor Who to include a slur in its title. However, celestial can also be used to refer to something in outer space, which for the most part most people do consider it that way. William Hartnell was on holiday for the recording of the Hall of Dolls and the Dancing Floor, and so the Doctor's appearances during the Trilogic Game scenes is limited to pre-recorded dialogue for the former and a disembodied right hand, that of extra Albert Ward, sporting the Doctor's singlet ring for both episodes. This was the first story to make use of the flashbacks to past Doctor Who adventures. Following the completion of this era, the Trilogic Game prop came into the possession of Peter Purves, who was very pleased with Stephen's increased importance in the serial. Unfortunately, after leaving Doctor Who, Purves endured a year and a half without work and came to see the Trilogic Game as the source of his bad luck. He finally discarded the prop and ironically was rewarded with a role in Z-Cars the following day, and shortly after that came to the offer to become presenter on Blue Peter. This is the last story with missing episodes until the invasion, for which no telesnaps are known to exist, due to the incoming production team resuming their usage. As such, only audio recordings and production stills exist for the first 3 episodes. Unofficial reconstructions even use screenshots from the final test to portray the episodes visually. The original storyline for this serial is very different and much more adult and satirical in scope. After he was fired, however, John Wills massively overspent on the arc as a final act of spite against his superiors, leaving the incoming team of Lynn Lloyds and Jerry Davies to virtually nothing to make the story with. Davies therefore had to do a massive rewrite and cutting the story right down in order to accommodate filming with as many pre-existing sets and costumes as possible, changing the story's tone from satirical to surreal. The original script featured the main characters from Gerard Savory's play George and Margaret, although the entire story revolved around the imminent arrival of the eponymous characters at the setting, a country house, during which much is revealed about George and Margaret. The play ended just as they were about to appear, so the audience never actually saw them. When permission to use George and Margaret was denied by Savory, their roles were filled in by 3 other sets of 2 characters, Joey and Clara, the King and Queen of Hearts, and Sergeant Ruggs and Mrs. Wiggs. Cyril was originally going to take the form of the Artful Dodger from Oliver Twist. The Dylan cap that Dodo wears was owned by Jackie Lane herself. Producing the Celestial Toymaker wasn't easy, even by Doctor Who standards. Most of the difficulty stemmed from the fact that it arose from a time of transition in the production office. Though commissioned by the team of producer John Wiles and script editor Donald Tosh, it was ultimately completed by the new team of Innes, Lloyds and Jerry Davies. The 2 sides simply had very different ideas about how the story should proceed. All 4 episodes were in fact written 3 different times. Brian Hales had delivered all 4 of the original scripts, likely in late 1965. Tosh and Wiles had immediately seen that the scripts could not be practically realised, and thus Tosh rewrote them entirely. By the time he was finished, though, he was no longer script editor. Davies, his replacement, now had to deal with the fact that Tosh had inserted the use of the title characters from a play called George and Margaret by Gerald Savory without obtaining permission. Since Savory was now head of the serials and had the power to veto scripts, he quickly rejected Tosh's approach to the Celestial Toymaker. Davies therefore had to tackle the scripts again. This time, rewriting got Savory's approval, but the old production team was left wondering what had happened to their scripts. Tosh opined that Davies' approach was much lighter, more pantomime than his own. The results were no more pleasing to John Wiles, who wrote a memo to Savory on the 25th of February 1966 that he had technically left the Doctor Who production team. In it, he claimed that the central battle of wills between the Doctor and the Toymaker had been downplayed to benefit of new elements involving more childish confrontations between the companions and the Toymaker's creations. Ultimately, Wiles would have liked to have seen the entire production halted since it commissioning producer and script editor had gone, and with them the original and more adult-orientated script. At the end of episode 4, there was an apology in the form of an oral announcement after credits to the estate of Frank Richards, the creator of the schoolboy hero Billy Bunter, because the character of Cyril depicted in the episode as an average schoolboy resembled Billy Bunter. As I have mentioned many times, there was a cancelled 6th Doctor story called The Nightmare Fair, which would have featured the televisual return of the Toymaker, but that never came to be. Although, this year, 2023, it is possible that the Toymaker may be returning. And that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed. The Celestial Toymaker has a lot of very long, in-depth facts, a lot of it to do with its production. And Celestial Toymaker is a rather beloved missing story, if that makes sense. A lot of people love this story, and mostly because we do have the audio and we can listen to that, and we do have the odd a bit of like production stills and what have you, so we get an idea of what it would have visually looked like, especially with the Queen and the King of Hearts. There's loads of pictures of those two, despite the fact that episode is completely missing. The final episode, on the other hand, is still around, and I have seen that one 100%. I've got the Lost episode, or Lost in Time DVD, so I have seen that one at the very least, with the addition of the audio from the previous three. The Celestial Toymaker, in my opinion, is sort of like a proto-Mind Robber, if you really think about it. This is basically the Mind Robber before the Mind Robber. And the Toymaker himself, I love the Toymaker. I think he's such a great villain, and it's a shame that we never saw him again. Well, I say we never saw him again. It is possible that Neil Patrick Harris is playing a new version of the Toymaker, which, honestly, that would be fantastic if it is true. I mean, everything's pointing that way. But, it's overall, I can understand why a lot of people don't like the story in terms of its childishness. This is a very childish story, but at the same time, I think that kind of goes with the theme. You can't have a story called The Celestial Toymaker and make it all serious, and even then, there's still some grisly things about it. The ending, the final part, for example, where they're playing hopscotch, or stepping stones, and the floor is electrifying. You just see him just fry, and you see this fried up body. It's grisly, so they do still have those more mature elements in this story, which I think is quite deserving. Like I said, this feels very much like a proto-Mind Robber, but it's still a great story. I like the idea of messing with reality. I like the idea of this villain that can just manipulate reality in his own image and do things in a playful manner. Celestial Toymaker is a fantastic villain, and I think this is a fantastic story. I love the way it ends as well. The fact that the Doctor just picked up a bit of candy, thinking, oh yeah, the candies should be fine, even though he's just been through all this crap, and he then is about to die right then and there. Such a massive cliffhanger. I do think the fact that they were planning on getting rid of William Hartnell in this story, which is honestly the most interesting fact of them all, because it makes you realize this could have been the first regeneration story, arguably speaking, unless of course the following story would have been him trying to find his old form or something like that. I don't know. Still, it's a very interesting story in terms of behind the scenes lore and production problems all around. It's just massively interesting, and as the story goes, it's fun. Hope you enjoyed this edition of Did You Know Doctor Who, and I'll see you next time.